Hey everybody, Scott Roberts here with Jerry Hubbell and Kent Marts, and for another episode. This is actually episode 4 of the OpenGOTO Community Live. And before we get started, I just want to say, I want to give a little shout out to the winner. I'm not going to say his name because I don't have permission to say his name, but there was a contest that Sky and Telescope magazine ran during the American Astronomical Society 236th meeting. If you had attended that meeting as an amateur, you would have been one of the, actually the odds were actually extremely good. But they signed up, they answered questions that were posed by not Rick Feinberg, Dennis DeChico, sorry. And if they had gotten it right, they would have had a chance to win what's behind me here, this white ED-102 aerospace triplet on an Exos 2 with PMC-Eight, 2 eyepieces, an 8x50 finder, really just a whole kit. And that whole package was worth about $3,000. So again, congratulations to the winner if you're watching, and you know who you are. Let's get started with Jerry. What's happening today out there in the OpenGOTO world?
Yeah, Scott, just so basically in the last day, I rolled out a firmware patch that corrects the pointing issues that we had when we slew to an object. And that's been corrected, and we've gotten feedback from one of our customers already that on his G11 it worked great last night. So, and I had tested it at our observatory also. There's still some tweaking I want to do with that. But I also want to talk about real quick about the configuration manager. There's, it's used to switch channels and between Wi-Fi and serial mode, and also used to download the firmware. But there's one other thing that it can do that that a lot of people aren't familiar with, and we probably don't advertise it a month. But I'm going to share my desktop and show you what it is. So can you see my desktop now?
Yep.
All right, so here is the configuration manager. Okay, one of the things you can do is you see this little tab called Explore Stars?
Yeah.
What that lets you do is it actually lets you install the database where it needs to go on the Windows, and also you can install an SD card for your Android tablet and select that right here, and it'll install it on your SD card for you without you having to do anything. You don't have to mess with directories or anything. So basically, you just select where you want it to go, you download it, and then you install it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. You select the removable drive if you're going to go to an SD card. You select the drive that it's mounted on, the drive letter, and then you hit install. So I just wanted to quickly tell people about that in case they don't know about it. And we don't advertise it enough. I've got to update the web page under Explore Stars to tell you that this utility is there to do that.
Sure.
For
Maybe
load the database.
A graphic where it just kind of points arrows at the different features. What does this do? What does that do? What does this do?
Right.
Yeah.
So let me stop my sharing.
We've got who's all with us? Dusty Haskins, Steve Malia's with us this afternoon. Hi, Steve. Cohen.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah, Cohen's with us again.
Oh,
He's with us. Gary Palmer in the UK. Gary is putting together a whole program for us about solar imaging. I think some processing stuff as well. Chris Moses, Caesar Brolo.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice to see you all here, guys. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to show them, Jerry?
Oh no, I thought no. That's so. Basically, that's all I had right now. I wanted to talk with when Kent brings up the we got some questions and comments from that Kent's gonna talk about. So we'll talk about those.
So one of the questions that came up today on the forum was somebody talked about a firmware update for the iPad, which either there's confusion about what the firmware is updating of and what it's for. So the firmware doesn't have anything to do with the iPad or the Android or the Windows Explorer stars. It has to do with the interface inside either the silver box that Scott held up or on the Exos 100, the built-in module on it. Jay, why don't you talk about that a little bit and give some details?
Yeah, so the firmware is actually the control system firmware. It's nothing to do with your user interface device. That's what I'm going to generically call it. It's just it's nothing to do with your tablet or your PC. It's just, but you do need to use a Windows PC to install it onto your PMC-8 control system on your mount. That's because the program that we use to actually load it onto the microcontroller, it's basically loaded into the EEPROM that's attached to the microcontroller in the controller, and the program was written by the manufacturer of the chip. It's written in Windows. So we rely on that to do a reliable download of the firmware into the PMC-8. So you do need access to a Windows PC to and use the Configuration Manager program, which I just showed, to download and install the firmware onto the PMC-8 system.
Hey, Jerry, as a longtime Mac user, used my first Apple product in 1984, and I know you're going to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
The Mac users will sit there and go, well, why don't you make it so it'll work on a Mac?
I understand. I mean, you can ask that of anything on Windows, of course. You can say, well, it's nice if we had that on Mac. And not to get too far in.
There's some Windows like some Mac software.
Right, maybe.
Do I feel a little kind of Windows love here?
No, I'm biased towards Windows because of, there's a lot of history in there, with the work that I do. But anyway, so of course, it's nice to be able to develop apps on all systems, and there is a way to do that, multi-platform way to do that. And that's not to say we couldn't develop another set of code that does exactly the same thing to load the firmware into the PMC-8 using a Mac, using the Mac development environment. We could, but it's
somebody like Chris Moses, who is Mac proficient, would have to write it.
Right. So that would be a community effort, I think. That's the OpenGOTO community would be the best source for that.
That's true. Yeah, if there's enough popularity for it, it'll come.
Well, that's the thing. How many people really need that and don't have access to a Windows PC, or despise them and will never have access to a PC?
There is that.
So I imagine there is, but I'm sure you've got people that that have Windows machines that you can take your box or your mount over to and say, hey, can you load this firmware for me?
Chris Moses says, Mac, what's that?
Yeah. So the alternative is, now this is the option you can do too. You can send your mount or your box back to us and we'll load the firmware for you.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
We'll do that work for you. So if it push comes to shove.
No problem. Steve Malia is asking, he says, is that patch for Explorer Stars only, or does it apply to the ASCOM driver as well? Did I miss something here? Was there a patch?
No, the patch, no, it's not a patch. Well, I patched the firmware and updated it to correct a problem. That's for the firmware in the control system. It's not an ASCOM.
It doesn't have anything to do with...
It's not an ASCOM. It's not the ASCOM driver, although I am working on an update to the ASCOM driver also.
You are? Okay.
And it's not the Explorer Stars. It's just the firmware that's in the control system.
What are you working on, Jerry?
So, not to get too much in the weeds again, the correction we did for the pointing in this last firmware change helped a lot, but it didn't correct it 100%. There's a little bit of residual error left in the pointing that in the way I calculate where to move the telescope in right ascension. All right, it hits declination dead on now, like it should have before, but it's very close now. It's within It's actually within a few arc seconds, believe it or not. That's how close it is
Hmm.
when it points on a G11 anyway. The RA is still slightly off because it'll overshoot or undershoot because of the calculation I do.
Oh, the time.
And the time it takes to slew, I have to add that onto the actual position.
Mm-hmm.
And so that time interval that I calculate is not quite, a half a second is equal to 7 arc seconds
Right.
error in time. And if I'm missing it by 3 seconds, then it's 45 arc seconds.
Actually, a little bit more. But.
Yeah, so that's what I've got to nail down to get it. I'm trying to get it within well under an arc minute in terms of pointing. And that's raw pointing. That's not even corrected. So you've got lash and everything else involved there. So if I can get the raw pointing down to about an arc minute, then that'll be excellent.
Sure. Let's see what other comments that we have here. Steve Malia. This is what I love about Steve Malia. He's one of the great dealers in our lineup of dealers. He's up in Canada, Ontario Telescope. He said that for any customer up in Canada, he said they can just send the box to him, whether they bought it from him or not. Okay, and he'll do that upgrade. He'll do the firmware upgrade for him. Thank you, Steve. That's a dealer in the best tradition.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah,
I
good.
often tell him. So, other comments here. Chris Moses says it might work under a VMON, the Mac. Has anyone ever tried that? Not sure what that is.
Virtual machine.
There you go. VMON. Okay.
I expect it's virtual.
Steve Seidentop, excuse me. I need to pronounce that correctly. Sorry, Steve. I've done it under boot camp on a MacBook Pro, but never in a VM. Got it. Okay.
Okay. So
next here.
Moving along.
Moving along.
Some discussion about the polar home position and why it is insensitive to RA numbers, and maybe a corollary, the differences between the polar home position and the park position.
Let me talk about that first. That's a simple thing, the difference between home and park. So in the PMC-8 system, home is a fixed value. It's set to, the motor counts are initialized to 0 at home position, and home corresponds to the North Celestial Pole. Home will always be the North Celestial Pole.
Or the South Celestial Pole.
Or the South Celestial Pole if you're in South. That's correct. So that's the way it's defined. There's no changing that. But what you can change is the park position. And the default is that park is equal to home. But you can set a user park value. Poth has a facility to set the park position. So when you set the park position, it looks at the motor counts at that position and says, oh, okay, that's where you want to park at now, and I'll store that in the profile. So those motor counts are stored in the profile so that when it boots up, it assumes that you're parked in that position now. It doesn't assume you're at the North Celestial or South Celestial Pole. So it's important to understand what you're doing when you do that. So the way you would use this, if you had a roll-off roof observatory and you wanted your telescope to lay flat instead of pointing up to the North Celestial Pole, you would position your mount the way you want it, and then you would hit park position, store the park position, and from now on, when you start up the PMC-8, that's where it would assume you were at. And then you could start your session. So that's the difference between park and home.
Okay. Any questions from the group here at all about this?
Doesn't look like it.
Doesn't look like it. Okay, wait. Is the system able to find the sun and track it?
Thanks.
Yes.
Yes, at your own risk.
At your own risk. That's right. That's right.
We actually list the sun in the Explore stars to go to the sun. You can go to the sun.
a lot of the ASCOM compliant Sky software has the sun in it, and you would just click on it and go. I think I kind of know where that's coming from, Gary, because Mead Instruments did not want to put the sun. In fact, they would show you where the sun was in some of their software, but they would not allow you to slew to it, and so that was the initial fear about that. Is that somebody would slew their telescope to the sun and think they could pull a Galileo and just look in and see sunspots without any filtration. So
Oh, they'll see sunspots, all right.
yeah, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Live.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Gary. Some mounts do have it blocked, not ours.
So, Jerry, the initial part of that last question was the polar home position being insensitive to RA numbers. You can change the RA and nothing appears to really happen on the telescope.
Right. Well, the RA axis will turn, but the telescope will still be pointing at the North Celestial Pole if that's where you're at when you're trying to move the RA axis. And you'll really see this where, for example, if you try to move, let's say you're at 5 degrees off the North Celestial Pole at 85 degrees declination, that would describe a tiny circle in the sky around the North Celestial Pole, right? Mm-hmm. You would see when you rotate it in RA. So let's think about if you try to move it 5 degrees away from the point you're at right now, you can't get outside. You can't get outside of 5 degrees. It would rotate the RA all the way around to try to move it 5 degrees away. So in that regard, it's insensitive to. I mean, you don't see it move a whole lot because you're at the North Celestial Pole.
Right.
The RA axis will move, but you don't see the telescope will not move. That's because of the celestial coordinate system. So it's very important when you get a go-to system like this that one of the first things you look up on the internet or learn about is the celestial sphere and what that means and what RA and DEC means.
Right.
All right. So, hey, Scott, look at the question Steve just Steve just posted.
He said there was a hack for AutoStar where you could create an asteroid with the same orbital elements as the Earth, but inverted, which would put it on the opposite side of the sun as the Earth. So you would be pointing through the sun to the imaginary object. Okay.
That's pretty wild.
That's a great hack.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
That's awesome.
Oh,
wasn't there a Twilight Zone episode about that?
That's right.
Well,
there
maybe
was,
I
it's
think.
somehow educational.
Yeah.
Could be.
How do we know there's no planet on the other side, opposite side of the sun from us?
No.
Well, in the Twilight Zone, we didn't.
That's right.
And we got somebody else.
Aren't there these Hollow Earth people too that probably has nothing to do with that? So, anyhow.
Hey, Scott, we had a couple of people check in just now.
Yeah.
Dennis
Danny,
Wild.
Check back in. It's nice to have her. Dennis Wild. Charlie Walsh.
Hey, Dennis, how you doing? Dennis.
Yeah. I know I'm missing somebody here.
For Shelley's with us. Say sorry. Question.
I wonder if Jennifer got to try the firmware update yet on her G11.
I think she was clouded out, if I remember correctly. I saw it. She posted something a little while ago.
Something that is kind of an aside. Steve is saying that there is some good imaging software for Mac called Indigo, which is here. By the way, if you're a Mac user and looking for good imaging software, check out Indigo Sky and at www.cloudmakers.edu. I don't like that name, Cloudmakers.
Yeah, for an astronomy program.
And the clouds come. Yes.
So
it's like buying a new telescope.
Jennifer Sellish says she has not yet got to try it out.
Okay.
And Cesar Brolo in Argentina, right, says a problem I have found for the southern hemisphere is that users here find the constellations turned and take time to choose the alignment stars.
Hmm.
It would be helpful to have a series have them in the correct position for this hemisphere.
Oh, and
Oh yeah, right. The
I s-
depictions of the star
yeah,
charts
we
are
need to flip them.
flip them over. That's right. Yeah,
Need to
that's
flip.
interesting. I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Jerry,
yeah.
you're supposed to think of everything.
I know. Well, 95%. I'm 2 sigma. I can get 2 sigma, but not 3 sigma.
Not 3 sigma. No, that's the reason why we have great guys like Caesar down there. So
That's right. Right. Mm-hmm.
help us. That's all.
Jerry, we've, on the PMC-Eight users group, Jerry has added the sub-thread.
That's a subgroup. Subgroup.
For PMC-Eight requested
Feature.
requested subgroup.
It's a
Yeah.
feature request. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and
Already,
these are for enhancements or new features or enhancements for the features.
looks like there's about 18 or 20 suggestions already made.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
Jerry's logging every one of them.
Yeah.
And
Caesar,
so,
maybe you could put that suggestion up there for the Southern Hemisphere. That's a great one.
yeah, go ahead and post it there just to create discussion, but we'll get it on the list without having to post it there. But that'll be
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
It's
it'd be good to get other people's ideas on it. So
Exactly. It's interesting to see what grows out of one person's comment and the other, the group knowledge that makes it a hive mind, if you will.
right.
All right. So, no more comments there. All right. So, I saw this post yesterday, I think, and it's worth reiterating. And I've restated it a little bit, but releasing the clutches / locks while trying to find something manually is a bad idea. Jerry, is that true?
Yeah. So you basically, when you unlock the clutches, of course, you lose where the telescope no longer points in terms of the PMC-8 where it knows it's at, where it doesn't know where it's at anymore. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. You'd have to resync. The way to do that is to line it up on a star and then sync on that star position. So you basically, to get it back, you would slew to a star, unloosen your clutches, and point your telescope back at that star, and then tighten your clutches up, and that'll realign it.
That would be the same as syncing it. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jerry, if you sync it, does that then, if you've done a 2 or 3 star alignment and then go to a known object and sync on it,
right,
that negate and zero out?
Chris points out, or do a plate solve.
No, yeah, you can do a plate solve so no, the alignment is a separate.
Here's the point. Most of the people locking and unlocking their mounts are visual observers, okay? Astrophotographers typically don't do this, okay? They get everything locked in, they do their work, they may make a fine correction somewhere, but yeah, then plate solving is absolutely the answer if you've got some sort of pointing error,
Right. So the other thing is that that the sync is totally separate from the alignment. Okay, the alignment model is fixed. Once you've done the virtual alignment with the 2 or 3 stars, then that model it's a pointing model. Okay, but it's the last thing. If you've loosened your clutches up, that pointing model stays in the system, but you've lost. It's like setting your clock wrong is what you've done in 2 axes. So now you got to sync your clock back on the motors. So if you were to manually center a star and hit the sync button, it calculates, okay, you're at this position, the motor counts should be X at this time, and it sets those values in the motors. It resets the motor counts to the correct value that you told it to be at when you center on a star. So that's what sync does. That's totally independent of the mount model for pointing.
Yeah. So Cohen says, so if you've loosened the RA and deck clutches or locks, and loosen them. If you loosen them, you loosen them again, slew to an object, sync it, and retighten the clutches? No.
No, no.
Oh, and if you're going to do it that way, what you do is let's say that you release the locks and you're looking at, we were talking about UFOs later or earlier. So let's just say that it's a UFO, okay? And you're
Where's the mute button? Where's the mute button for Scott? I don't have.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but let's just say you did that, all right? Or you saw a huge asteroid impact the moon and you wanted to go look at it, all right? But let's say that you were looking at M57, for example. Okay, Vega is right next to it, right? And so what you could do is you could just punch in Vega, do a go-to, let it run. You can hear the motors running. Let the motor stop. Loosen up your clutches. Physically move the telescope to Vega. Tighten your clutches. That's it. Don't hit sync at that point. If you want to hit sync, that's a different function or a different way of doing this. And Jerry, why don't you describe that one more time so they got it?
So if you want to do a sync instead, so now you're pointed away from Vega, you'll have to use the controller to slew it manually and center Vega in your scope. But your clutches are always tight in this mode. You make sure your clutches are tight. You slew with the motors over to Vega in your telescope, and you center it. Now, the coordinates are going to be wrong because it was off. So now what you're going to do is you're going to sync the sky, and you're going to sync the mount to where you're pointing at in the sky. And so you hit the sync button, and now the motor counts go to the correct position to Vega that you're pointed at. So that's the other way to do it.
Yeah.
A hard concept to get if you don't. I mean, you got you got to do it 2 or 3 times to understand it. So I think people. I've had people who have done a 2 or 3 star alignment, and then they'll hit the sync button, and then hit next and go, and they think that sync button is how they're syncing on the star, when in reality, in the 2 star or 3 star alignment, they hit enter to just go to the next, and that's how it builds up the transform.
Yeah, but the problem is the versions of Explore Stars weren't always clear. It was really confusing because we use sync interchangeable with enter, which is not really the case. So on the Windows version, we may still have that. I think we still have that problem where it's labeled as sync instead of enter when you do a 2 or 3 star alignment. And so the sync is a very specific function compared to the alignment enter. Mm-hmm. So when you enter on an alignment, you're basically gathering the data for that position at that time for the model to be able to build the model.
Okay, Cohen made a comment. Good to know he did loosen them once the first day, and he had a big old smiley face. So I think he may have learned his lesson. But Jerry, on the Exos 2 mount, by loosening your clutches and moving them significantly, you can change the worm gear, ring gear interface and create some either loose gear or tight gear situations. Talk about that. We've got a couple of minutes. So
what that is so you're basically manually moving the position of the scope, pointing somewhere else in the sky, which means you have to rotate the worm and wheel to get back to where you were, which means now you're tracking on a different part of the wheel with your worm interface on your gears. Your gear mesh is at a different position compared to where it was before. So that's what you're talking about. So if there's a little bit of mesh.
Yeah, there might be a little bit different
change,
lash.
A little bit different
or
lash
maybe
at
tighter,
that position.
There may be less lash, so.
Yeah, it could be tighter or it could be looser.
Yeah. Every gear has.
More than likely, it's going to be one or the other, probably.
Right. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's going to make a large-scale pointing error. So,
no, it's not. It's not significant.
So it wouldn't be something really to worry about.
But people then see it get to a loose spot in the mesh, and they experience a lot of really loose gear lash, and that creates angst and fear there's some kind
also
of mechanical problem.
That's a time too that perhaps somebody needs to adjust the worm block. So
Bob Hoskins
Yeah.
Bob Hoskins written a great guide that's on the forum for the to adjust the Exos 2 mount.
Who's
What
that?
Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins. Okay. So
He
that's on
he
our knowledge base, or that's on the PMC?
no, that's on the PMC-8 forum.
Okay.
That's in the file section. That's a procedure. That's really a. He's got pictures and other things in there to show you how to basically take your mount apart
hyper
and put it back together and get the adjustments correct.
Right.
That's what the OpenGOTO community has done for us with Bob.
That's cool. Thank you, Bob.
So, I'll have people call. What I'll do to have them fix that, to find that worm gear mesh is to run it 15 degrees, unlock it, check the gear lash, unlock the RA, put it back in the home, run it the same direction 15 more, and just work their way around that gear until they find that spot where the gear mesh is tight with the worm, and so there's not a lot of gear lash. It's just nice and just a little bit of wiggle. Unlock it, put it to the home position, and set that good tight gear mesh as the home position. Then they're always moving it away, and that's I probably do that a couple times a month and talk people through that process, and they're very happy with the results after that because they learn, don't unlock it and turn it and then never put it back to that spot.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll tide you over until you're ready to take it apart and adjust it.
The real answer is that you adjust the worm block. Occasionally I travel with this G11 that's behind me. This thing has been to Chile and it's been to Star Parties coast to coast, and it just rides with me. I don't fly it, it's just riding with me. But you go over some of those roads in like Pennsylvania or Oklahoma or
where did you
roads,
break, Barbara?
where the winter has buckled and made a lot of potholes and stuff like that. And I have gotten to places, and this has happened to me all my years in amateur astronomy where I've been doing these kinds of things. And worm blocks come loose, all kinds of stuff. And so it's nice to know how to adjust these things, so you can get optimal performance. If you're in an observatory and everything's all dialed in, sat down, never moved, then you never really have to worry about this kind of thing. But
right.
Hey Scott, what do you use to transport the G11 head? We have a box making system in the back, and I have a set of double wall cardboard boxes with a custom set of foam that I got originally with the G11, and I have it set in there, so that's how I do it. But
I wanted to.
there's
I'm
other
sorry.
guys that do all kinds of nice cases for their mounts.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that doing these adjustments, taking your mount apart and putting it back together, does not void the warranty.
No.
We want you to learn how to adjust your mount.
Yeah.
Although
there's people within the company that would, if they get it after somebody they don't know what they're doing, they get angry about that. But the thing is that most amateur astronomers, if they're brave enough to go in and work on things, they've been taking stuff apart for maybe all their lives, like me.
Yeah, like you, since you were a little boy.
Yeah, but there has been more than once where I took something apart and a bunch of ball bearings came out and stuff like that, and I had to figure out how it went back together. So, yeah, Pelican case, Cohen, that's a great case, sure. Okay, guys, we are about to the end of our show. Is there any other comments at all, or?
Yeah, a couple of questions from the audience, maybe.
Possibly. Let's see. Patience is a virtue in taking your mount apart and putting it back together, but it gets easier. How many times have you done that, Jenny? Let's see. I don't see other questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys, that's
So-
it. So, as we go along with the show, one of the things I often like to do is just kind of a community builder is to have a contest of some sort or uh, something for like a door prize. So we're gonna come up with something. Um, Jerry and Kent and I will kind of brainstorm on this and come up with a cool door prize. It'll be fun. No, it won't be a G11 or an AD165,
Yeah, I
but
want an
you'll
ED
like it anyway.
165.
Okay. And we'll have some interesting questions to bring up as contest questions to challenge your knowledge of the PMC-8 system.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. I
Yeah,
can come up with some good questions, I
yeah.
think.
And when we get the winners, we'll start to announce it here on this show. Anyhow, if you guys need, you guys know that if you need any help at any time, that you can call us at 866-252-3811 and talk to Kent. You can reach out to Jerry Hubbell at jrh@explorescientific.com. You can reach out to me. My cell phone is 949-637-9075. You can call me. I've had some people calling me recently, so and we're all happy to help you. If you're in Canada, of course you can contact us directly, but Steve Malia is there with outstretched arms. So
Yeah, Steve's a great asset. I appreciate that very
yes,
much,
yeah.
Steve. He knows a lot about the PMC-8 too system.
Steve, how about Explore Scientific hosting a one-night star party for your local astronomy club? Hosting a one-night star party.
As a door prize?
Not sure, Steve. We're going to have to talk about that. So we're going to have to talk about that. I'm game for a lot of stuff. So anyhow, it was great to have you guys join us today, and we will see you tomorrow at 4:30 Central. Take care and keep looking up.
Send us your questions.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.